This story begins when my husband, not long after my husband's face turned deathly pale as he screamed, "I'm ruined." My name is Riley Lawson in the corporate world. I am the Vice President of Operations for Heartland Provisions, a major food distribution company. But inside my husband's family, I was just a daughter-in-law who had to know her place, mind her manners, and speak with absolute deference. My title might have sounded impressive, but my real job was acting as a shock absorber for every crisis. If a cold storage warehouse fluctuated by a few degrees, if an order was delayed, or if a delivery truck got stuck in a BQE traffic jam, the whole system descended into chaos. I was used to midnight phone calls, the smell of fresh ink on shipping manifests, and taking Zoom meetings standing in the middle of a loading dock. In the office, people called me Ms. Lawson, the powerhouse of operations. But the second I stepped into my apartment, I had to remind myself to think 3 times before speaking a single word. I had been married for 4 years and 2 months. My husband, Blake Sterling, was the CEO of Heartland Provisions. In public, he was flawlessly elegant. His tailored suits never had a single wrinkle, and just one charming smile from him was enough to make business partners nod in agreement. Outsiders used to tell me I was lucky, but only those inside the marriage knew that sometimes, even under the thickest down comforter, you felt a freezing chill. Our marriage might have looked radiant from the outside, but inside it was often pitch black. We lived in a luxury penthouse in Midtown Manhattan. Even though we didn't live with my mother-in-law, Catherine, it didn't feel any different. She lived in a massive estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, but kept a pied-à-terre just 10 minutes away from us. She used to say, "I don't like to intrude." Yet, whenever the mood struck her, she showed up unannounced. She would walk into our apartment like she owned the place. She'd march straight into the custom kitchen, open the Sub-Zero fridge, inspect the espresso machine, check the recycling bin, and then ask, "What are you two eating?" At first, I tried to keep my cool, thinking it was just her way of caring. But over time, I realized her concern was a measuring tape. Everything was judged against a standard, her standard. If I ate bland food, she'd say Blake wouldn't like a boring wife. If I ate salty food, she'd remind me that women needed to watch their figures. If I left early for work, she'd claim a workaholic wife was neglecting her husband. If I came home late, she warned that the city was full of temptations for women. Her words were never openly vulgar, but every sentence came loaded with passive-aggressive jabs at my dignity as a daughter-in-law. It felt like I was perpetually on the verge of making a fatal mistake. My sister-in-law, Serena, was 4 years younger than me. She came to visit often. Her mouth was sweet as sugar, but her words constantly backed me into difficult corners. In front of me, Serena would smile with fake pity. "I feel so bad for you, Riley. You look exhausted." But the second she turned to her mother, she would whisper, "Mom, don't you think Riley looks really haggard lately? She must be stressed. A man gets tired of coming home to a tense wife, you know." I just stayed quiet. I understood that in this family, even a half-joking phrase could detonate and turn into a massive problem. That month, a late summer heat wave hit New York. In the mornings, when I opened the windows, the air felt thick and suffocating. I had a secret that not even my husband knew yet. I was 14 weeks pregnant. I wasn't hiding it out of selfishness. I was hiding it out of fear. Fear that Catherine would use this pregnancy as a free pass to control my life, forcing me to quit my job, demanding I move to her Greenwich estate to eat, sleep, and breathe on her schedule. And I feared something even more painful. If I shared such happy news, and Blake responded with cold indifference, it would carve a deep wound right through my heart. The chill in a marriage doesn't arrive like a sudden blizzard. It creeps in, little by little, through tiny shifts, like the changing of the seasons. Blake had started coming home later. Our dinners together became rare. His phone was always face down on the marble countertop. If a call came in, he would step out onto the terrace to speak in a hushed voice, returning with the excuse that it was a client. One day he came home, and his suit carried the lingering, unmistakable scent of a heavy, unfamiliar woman's perfume. I asked him, half joking, "Late meeting, or are you moonlighting as a fragrance model?" He answered naturally, "Female clients wear a lot of perfume. You know how it is." It sounded plausible, but the slight hesitation in his eyes made my stomach churn. Right around our anniversary, there was a massive coordination breakdown with our supply chain. I was sprinting between the warehouse floor and the operations center with a tension headache throbbing behind my eyes. My assistant Mia handed me a bottle of warm water and whispered, "Breathe, Riley. Don't work yourself to death." I nodded. Health is everything, but in my husband's family, I wasn't allowed to look weak. That night, I left work early and prepared a massive, elaborate dinner: seared scallops, roasted asparagus, and truffle risotto. I tried to warm up our cavernous apartment with the smell of a home-cooked meal. Blake got home around 9 at night, glanced at the dining table, and just muttered, "Ah." He took a few obligatory bites, his eyes glued to his phone screen, as if the device was his actual dinner date. Right then, the private elevator chimed. Catherine walked in, and the second she put down her Birkin bag, she swept the room with her gaze. What kind of wife lets a house feel so dead? A man works all day, he should come home to warmth. Then she turned to Blake with a preaching tone. "Blake, you might be busy, but your wife needs to know how to run a home." I stood right next to her, my hands still damp from washing dishes, and all I could answer was, "Yes, Catherine." In my heart, I knew her advice might sound wise to an outsider, but in reality, it was a leash designed to yank me back to my assigned place. Catherine scanned the room and locked onto the kitchen island, where I had accidentally left a bottle of prenatal vitamins that I had transferred into a generic supplement container. She picked it up, squinted at the label, and asked, "What are you taking?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I offered her a tight smile. "Just some vitamins so I don't get so tired." She put it down without pushing further, but her eyes told me everything. She was taking mental notes. That night, our apartment was brightly lit, but I felt like I was entirely alone in that massive kitchen. I placed a hand over my belly, pressing softly, as if I was afraid that a single deep breath could shatter everything. People say that if a husband and wife share a single heart, they can empty the ocean. But before I even had the chance to try, my own heart had already dried up. The next morning, I woke up while the Manhattan skyline was still wrapped in a pre-dawn haze. I made a mug of hot water with lemon. I forced myself to swallow a dry piece of toast to settle the morning sickness, and went to the office early. While most people were still picking out what to wear, I was already trying to find a fix for a container held up at the port. The moment I walked into the lobby, my phone rang. The warehouse manager reported a critical temperature fluctuation in cold storage unit number 3. If it wasn't fixed immediately, millions of dollars in frozen goods would spoil. I ran to the operations floor, calling technicians, facility managers, and the logistics team. Before I could catch my breath, dispatch called. A major delivery truck had flipped on the Cross Bronx Expressway. If we missed our delivery windows, the grocery chains would hit us with brutal contractual penalties. I planted myself in front of my multi-monitor setup. My fingers flew across the keyboard. My mouth fired off clear, concise instructions. Mia shadowed me, handing me clipboards and sliding a cup of water onto my desk. She looked at me and joked, "You're the kind of person who tries to carry the weight of the world alone, Riley. Keep this up and your spine is going to snap." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Around 10:30 in the morning, Blake casually strolled onto the operations floor. In front of the employees, he played the perfect CEO, shaking hands, greeting people, and offering charismatic words of encouragement. But when his eyes briefly met mine, his stare was as cold as the steel doors of the freezer vaults. It wasn't hate. It wasn't love. It was just total apathy. I took the initiative and gave him a brief status report on the cold storage and the truck crash. He listened, nodded, and said lightly, "Good thing you can handle it. I'm booked solid with client meetings today." That single sentence made me feel like a subordinate giving a status report, not a wife sharing the burden of a company built by both of us. Words are free, but some are so cheap they hurt. At noon, I needed to access the system to approve an emergency budget adjustment for the warehouse repairs, but the system flashed an error: insufficient privileges. Normally, my position had the authority to approve operational expenses up to a very high threshold. I figured it was an IT glitch and called tech support. After a moment of hesitation, the IT guy said, "Ms. Lawson, your permissions were modified this morning. Direct request from the CEO. I'm just following orders." I froze. An order that had never been communicated to me. I didn't lose my temper. I just asked him to send me an email confirming the permission change so there would be a written record. Mia looked at me with concern. "Riley, why did they pull your access?" I didn't answer immediately. I just whispered, "Everything has to be in black and white." Saying it out loud, I realized I was teaching myself to survive with a cold, calculating mind. During lunch, Mia pulled me into the emergency stairwell. She whispered, "Riley, I went up to the executive floor earlier for some files. I heard Blake talking to his new secretary. He told her, 'Keep this completely off the books. Make sure nobody sees the process.'" It gave me a really bad feeling. I asked, "What's the new secretary's name?" "Julia Sands. Seems very quiet. Speaks really softly." I nodded, keeping my face blank. In this world, you can know a person's face, but never their heart. Someone's true nature isn't found in the softness of their voice, but in what they hide behind their back. That afternoon, I had to drive out to our New Jersey facility. Traffic was a nightmare. Cars were piled up, horns blared endlessly. I stared at the gridlock and suddenly felt like I was watching my own life. Everyone trying to move forward, but always blocked by a nameless, suffocating congestion. Back at the office, late in the afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number asking for my schedule for the week. I opened it. It was Julia Sands, exceedingly polite. "Excuse me, Miss Lawson. I would like to request your itinerary to coordinate with Mr. Sterling's calendar." It sounded reasonable, but my internal alarms started blaring. My schedule had always been managed by Mia and me. No one from the executive floor had ever requested it like that. I replied with standard corporate distance. "Please send a formal request via email to Mia. We will respond accordingly." I refused to engage in private texts. In an office, a misinterpreted message can become a weapon. When I got home, the apartment was spotless, but the air felt suffocating. Blake arrived earlier than usual, but not to eat dinner with me. He went straight to his study, locked the door, and started a call. I walked past and caught fragments. "Documents, expenses. Transfer the money immediately." His voice was low but frantic, as if he was terrified someone might hear him. I was in the kitchen reheating soup. My stomach was churning like boiling water. Blake came out to grab a glass of water, saw me, and asked casually, "How was the office today? Everything secure?" I said, looking right at him, "Secure on my own terms." He stood still for a second, then walked back to his study, acting like my answer had absolutely nothing to do with him. Right then, my mother-in-law called. She skipped the greetings. "Riley, Blake is under a lot of pressure. Don't give him headaches. A smart woman knows when to step back so her husband respects her." I gave her my usual, "Yes, Catherine," but inside I thought, if I keep stepping back, when will my shoulders hit the wall? I looked at my hands. The hands that by day approved multi-million-dollar logistics operations for a supply chain, forced by night to learn submission, just to soothe someone else's ego. I never wanted to be a paranoid wife, but the fragments of that day, the revoked system access, the secret calls the secretary trying to dig up my schedule, felt like grains of sand in my eye, tiny but impossible to ignore. I sat down, placed both hands on my belly, and pulled them away instantly, as if I was afraid of betraying my own secret. When a man starts hiding things, it means he's paving an exit route for himself, leaving his wife alone in a maze of questions. Our anniversary fell on a crisp New York morning, but the wind battering the skyscraper windows sounded mournful. I woke up earlier than usual, not out of excitement, but because the week 14 nausea hit me hard. I managed to choke down a few bites of plain oatmeal and drink some ginger tea to settle my stomach. Blake walked out of the walk-in closet in a flawless Tom Ford shirt. He checked his Rolex while buttoning his cuffs and said, "I'm heading out. Back-to-back meetings all day." I stood by the kitchen island and asked quietly, "Are you coming home for dinner?" He didn't look up. We'll see. Two incredibly light words that dropped like lead weights into my chest. I got dressed for work, packing some saltines, just in case the nausea returned. Mia met me by the elevators at the office. Seeing how pale I was, she immediately handed me a thermos of homemade ginger broth. "Drink this, Riley. It'll help." Small acts of kindness like that sometimes make you want to cry simply because they arrive right when you need them most. The second I stepped onto the operations floor, I was buried under approvals, replacement, inventory documents, the New Jersey facility demanding more trucks, and the freezer unit needing a complete sensor overhaul. I tackled them one by one. My mind was pulled tight as a piano wire. Around 10:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Blake. "Happy anniversary. Booked solid with board meetings, but I didn't forget. I ordered you something high-end and nutritious. Eat it to stay healthy." I read it 3 times. In 4 years, he rarely bothered with little romantic gestures. I wasn't obsessed with gifts, but this sudden shower of attention felt like a sunny sky abruptly turning black with storm clouds. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Before I could reply, reception called. "Miss Lawson, you have a delivery." I went down to the lobby and saw Julia Sands standing near the front desk, clutching a stack of files. She smiled softly. "Miss Lawson, coming to pick up your delivery." I answered her with a curt nod. A courier handed me a heavy, luxury insulated container from a 3 Michelin star restaurant. The label on the pristine paper bag was clear. Lobster bisque with gold leaf. Just reading those words made my stomach flip. For a pregnant woman suffering from nausea, the thought of a creamy, heavy, rich seafood dish was enough to make my throat burn. I carried the container to my office and set it on my desk, trying to act normal. Mia saw it, and her eyes lit up. "Wow, Mr. Sterling is so thoughtful." I gave her a bitter smile. "Yeah, maybe." I cracked the lid open just a sliver. A thick cloud of steam hit me instantly. The smell of heavy cream, concentrated lobster broth, and truffle oil struck me like a physical punch. Before I could even look at it, my eyes welled up with tears and my throat closed tight. I slammed the lid shut and sprinted to the executive restroom. I gripped the marble sink, dry heaving until my knees shook. Tears streamed down my face, not from physical pain, but from a crushing sense of powerlessness. I felt like a puppet on strings, forced to smile while I was drowning. I washed my face, dried off, and took a deep breath. In the mirror, I looked like a ghost. I tried to calm down. A straight tree doesn't fear the storm, but even a straight tree feels the cold when the wind is toxic. Mia asked with concern, "Acid reflux?" I nodded slowly. "I'm just really sensitive to smells today." She opened her mouth to ask something else, but I shook my head. I wasn't ready for anyone to know about the pregnancy, especially if the gossip reached my in-laws twisted out of proportion. I stared at the insulated container on my desk. If I threw it away, someone would see it, and I'd be labeled a spoiled, ungrateful executive's wife. If I put it in the communal fridge, the smell would leak out, and I'd have to explain why I wasn't eating my husband's expensive gift. I chose the safest route. I locked it inside my personal filing cabinet. Sometimes silence is the only way to dodge a bullet, especially when you don't know who's pulling the trigger. Around 11 in the morning, Blake called. His tone was flat. "Did you eat?" "Not yet," I said. "The smell is a bit too intense for me today." He paused, then said, "Eat a little. Don't let people see it and start whispering that the CEO's wife is weak and ungrateful." Hearing that broke my heart. He cared more about appearances than my physical well-being, the classic Sterling family protocol. I hung up and went back to my documents, but a tiny thorn had lodged itself in my mind. Not because the soup was expensive, but because of the highly specific way he chose our anniversary to take care of me, and his obsession with what people would say. I was nothing more than a PR asset to him. Late in the morning, I unlocked my filing cabinet to grab a document and temporarily set the insulated container on my desk. It sat there like an unopened gift, but also like an unanswered threat. At exactly 11:15, Mia pushed my office door open, her face rigid. She whispered, "Riley, your mother-in-law just stepped off the elevator." My hand froze. In a corporate office, some rumors drift in like a gentle breeze, but they're enough to give you goosebumps. Before I could ask anything, the sharp, authoritative click-clack of expensive heels echoed down the hallway. Catherine appeared exactly as she always did, unannounced, uninvited, and unapologetic. She was wearing a tailored Chanel tweed suit, her hair perfectly styled, a Hermes Kelly bag hanging from her arm. Her eyes swept the operations floor. She didn't look for signs or ask for directions. She walked through as if her name was on the building. Julia Sands followed a half step behind her, hugging a stack of folders. The new secretary looked at me with a polite, empty smile. "Miss Lawson, Mrs. Sterling is here to see you." I stood up, keeping my voice steady. "Good morning, Catherine. What brings you to the office?" She didn't answer right away. She marched straight in, her eyes locked on my desk, right on the insulated container. Bad luck never comes alone, like the saying goes. My only mistake was leaving it out for 2 minutes. She offered a mocking smile. "Oh, look at this. The CEO has 100 fires to put out, and he still finds time to order gourmet food for his wife. It must be wonderful to be you." Hearing her tone, my mouth went dry. I answered quietly, "Yes, Blake ordered it." She reached out and tapped the lid like she was inspecting evidence. Have you eaten it? I kept it brief. I'm a little sensitive to the smell today, so I'm saving it for later. She cut me off. Her tone was sharp but refined. The kind of insult delivered at country club volume. Sensitive to this, sensitive to that. Women today are far too delicate. People will look at you and think our family doesn't know how to take care of our daughter-in-law, leaving you looking so sickly. I felt the stares bearing down on me through the glass walls of my office. Employees were intentionally walking slower. Anything involving the CEO's mother was front-page news. I maintained my professional smile. I'm perfectly fine, Catherine. Please don't worry about me. Catherine dropped her Kelly bag onto the guest chair, then walked around my desk, pulled out my ergonomic chair, and sat in it. Her sheer audacity took my breath away. She jerked her chin toward the container. Open it and eat it right now. How dare you waste such expensive, nutritious food? Your husband treats you like a queen, and you act like a spoiled brat. I stood beside her, my hands balled into fists behind my back. I knew that if I flat out refused, she would declare me a defiant, disrespectful brat. If I stayed quiet, she would escalate the situation. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Catherine, I really can't stomach something that heavy right now. Please. She cut me off. Please what? Are you afraid of getting fat? Or are you starving yourself just to make my son look bad? My face burned. I realized she wasn't there about the food. She was there to publicly humiliate me and assert her dominance. I don't mean that at all, Catherine. She glared at me, suddenly grabbed the container and ripped the lid off. The steam hit the air. Lobster cream and truffle. My stomach violently rebelled. I turned my head away. She let out a dry laugh. Look at you. So weak. When I was pregnant with Blake, I was still hosting galas and managing the estate. No pampering. She grabbed the plastic spoon, scooped up some bisque, and shoved it toward my mouth. Eat. I'm going to sit right here until you do. In that moment, I knew. This was pure subjugation. I looked at the spoon, I looked at her cold eyes, and I caught a glimpse of Mia standing on the other side of the glass, her eyes wide with panic. I couldn't throw up here. I couldn't become the laughingstock of the office. I gently pushed her wrist down. My voice was low but absolute. Catherine, I am asking you to stop. I cannot eat it. She slammed the spoon down onto the desk, the plastic cracking on impact. What a disgrace! A thoughtful husband and an ungrateful wife. If I let this continue, the narrative would be cemented. So, I took the most passive-aggressive route available. With the perfectly polite tone of a submissive daughter-in-law, I said, "Then you should eat it, Catherine, so it doesn't go to waste. After all, it is very nutritious." Catherine froze for a second. Then, as if she had just won a chess match, she pulled the container toward her. That's better. Good food shouldn't be wasted on those who can't appreciate it. And she actually ate it, sitting in my chair at my desk in the middle of my operations floor. Between bites, she delivered a masterclass in psychological warfare, loud enough for the cubicles outside to hear. If Blake had married someone who knew how to run a home, his life would be much easier. It's never good when a woman goes corporate at night. It makes the man look small. We are a prominent family. A daughter-in-law needs to know how to protect her husband's image. I stood next to her like a shadow. I couldn't leave because walking out would be insubordination. I couldn't argue because arguing would be hysteria. I just watched the clock, checked my monitors, and regulated my breathing. Mia slipped in quietly, placed a glass of ice water on the desk for Catherine, and vanished like a ghost. Catherine practically finished the bisque, wiped her mouth with a napkin, stood up, and grabbed her bag. Before walking out, she delivered her final sermon. Remember, a woman's true strength lies in her ability to endure. Bite your tongue and good things will come. Keep acting stubborn and the world will laugh at you. With that, she spun on her heels and marched out. Julia Sands followed her, still smiling softly, but her eyes slid toward the empty soup container as if confirming a target had been neutralized. The office door clicked shut. For 10 seconds, absolute silence fell over the operations floor. Mia looked at me, tried to speak, but stopped. I leaned over and picked up the container. My hands were shaking a little. I wasn't crying. I just felt like something very deep inside my chest had been violently ripped out. It wasn't the soup. It was my dignity. I pulled my chair forward. No, wait. Someone else had just sat in it to teach me a lesson. I sat down, clicked my mouse, and reopened the logistics spreadsheet. The cursor blinked. The supply chain doesn't stop for anyone's bruised ego. But right then, a crystal clear thought wrote itself across my mind. Sometimes a gift isn't given out of love. It's given to force you into submission. I had barely settled into my chair, my eyes still scanning the shipping manifests, when a terrifying sound erupted in the hallway. Fast, frantic footsteps. Not the usual corporate hustle, but a panicked sprint. Then, a heavy thud against the drywall. I shot up, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mia was the first to react, yanking my office door open. All the color drained from her face, her lips trembling. "Riley, it's Blake's mother." Instinct took over. I sprinted into the hallway. The normally pristine, minimalist corridor had turned into a scene of absolute chaos. Catherine was slumped against the wall. One hand clutched her stomach. The other was planted on the carpeted floor. Her entire body convulsed with violent tremors, as if something was actively tearing her apart from the inside. Sweat poured down her forehead, ruining her perfect hair. The horrific sound of agonizing, violent dry heaving bounced off the glass walls. An HR coordinator nearby was frantically waving paper towels, too terrified to touch her. A security guard came running down the hall, shouting into his radio. I looked at the floor. A trail of thick, golden yellow lobster bisque was splattered across the carpet. The rich smell of seafood now mixed with a sharp, acidic stench of vomit. It was nauseating. Someone nearby screamed, "Oh my God, she's been poisoned!" Another voice whispered low, but loud enough to be heard. Didn't she just eat the food from Ms. Lawson's office? Hearing that sentence was like feeling ice water injected into my veins. One sentence. That was all it took to plant the seed of murder. Catherine convulsed again, then snapped her head up and locked eyes with me. Her gaze was no longer the arrogant glare of a wealthy matriarch. It was the terrified, feral look of someone in unimaginable agony, a mix of primal fear and pure rage. She reached out a shaking, claw-like hand and grabbed the fabric of my pants. Her perfectly manicured nails dug in so hard I felt the pinch on my skin. Her voice came out shredded, raspy. Poison. That word dropped into the hallway like a live grenade. The entire floor froze. People covered their mouths. Some physically stepped back, retreating from the blast radius. I stood paralyzed for a fraction of a second. Then, I instantly dropped to my knees, grabbing her wrists so she wouldn't collapse completely and crack her head open on the floor. I didn't have time to process the shock, because right in front of me, an older woman was dying. I snapped my head toward the security guard. "Call 911 right now. Get the building paramedics up here. Code blue." I turned to Mia. Mia, water bottle, and a cold, wet towel. Move. Mia bolted. I helped Catherine lean against the wall, trying to get her to breathe. She kept gagging. With every spasm, her grip on my pants tightened. It was like she wanted to drag me down to hell with her. People say, don't kick someone when they're down. In that moment, I just wanted to keep her breathing, no matter how she had treated me. But at the same time, my ears caught the murmurs of the crowd. Maybe the daughter-in-law spiked it. She walked out of her office and boom, look at her. I knew that if I panicked or acted defensive, I would look guilty. I had to stay hyper-logical. I took a deep breath and ordered the crowd. Everyone step back. Give her air. If you have a mask, put it on and clear the hallway. My authoritative tone snapped a few of them out of their shock. They backed away, but their eyes stayed fixed on me. Officially, I was the prime suspect. Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the Manhattan air. Paramedics rushed off the elevator with a gurney and trauma kits. They started firing off questions. Medical history. What did she ingest? Seafood. Allergy. Before I could answer, Catherine seized again, her face going completely white as she vomited a foamy liquid. The paramedics instantly slapped an oxygen mask on her and started checking her vitals. One of the techs looked at the mess on the floor and asked harshly, "Who gave her this?" "She ate it 10 minutes ago in my office," I said, keeping my voice absolutely clinical. I didn't say who ordered it. I didn't say I was forced. I knew that in a crisis, every single word goes on the record. Speak only in facts. Mia returned with the towel. She crouched next to me and whispered, her voice shaking, "Riley, you have to document the timeline. When she arrived, when she ate, when she fell. We need a record." I looked at Mia in the middle of that nightmare. Her corporate instincts pulled me back from the edge. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. My thumbs were shaking, but I typed furiously. 11:02 a.m. Catherine enters operations floor. 11:13 a.m. Catherine leaves my office. 11:15 a.m. Commotion in hallway. Collapse. 11:17 a.m. 911 called. 11:22 a.m. Paramedics arrive. I wasn't being cold. I was building a shield. Because if this story got twisted even slightly, my life was over. The paramedics loaded Catherine onto the gurney. She was still clutching my pant leg, refusing to let go. The lead paramedic looked at me. "A family member needs to ride in the ambulance." I hesitated. If I went, I'd be trapped in a confined space as the prime suspect. If I stayed, I'd be the heartless, murderous daughter-in-law. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. I remembered Catherine's words. A woman's true strength lies in her ability to endure. But this wasn't about enduring. This was about the brutal calculus of survival. I turned to Mia. "Stay here. Lock my office. Lock the filing cabinets. Do not let anyone touch my desk or the trash cans. If anyone asks, I'm with the ambulance." Mia nodded, her eyes red. I walked alongside the gurney toward the freight elevator. When the doors closed, I could feel the weight of 50 stairs burning a hole in my back. The back of the ambulance smelled heavily of rubbing alcohol and sterile plastic. Catherine lay weakly writhing under the oxygen mask. The paramedic sitting across from me worked frantically. "Any pre-existing conditions? Hypertension, diabetes, seafood allergy?" I swallowed hard. "No known conditions as far as I know. Sometimes she complains of acid reflux. I've never heard of a seafood allergy." The paramedic nodded, his face grim. "She's tachycardic, pressure is tanking, severe dehydration from the vomiting. I'm calling in a trauma alert." Hearing that her blood pressure was crashing made my pulse spike. Despite everything, I didn't want her to die. I pulled out my phone and called Blake. Once, twice. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was smooth, relaxed, the voice of a man sitting in a climate-controlled boardroom. "What's up?" I forced my voice into a flat, operational rhythm. "Blake, Catherine is in an ambulance. She ate the bisque you sent to my office. She collapsed in the hallway. We're en route to Mount Sinai." Dead silence. Then he exploded. "You're trying to kill my mother!" I stopped breathing. His reaction wasn't shock. It wasn't, "Oh my God, is she okay?" It was an immediate, calculated accusation. It was the reaction of a man who already knew there was something lethal inside that highly nutritious gift. He instantly lowered his voice, clumsily shifting gears. "I mean, what if she's allergic? Why the hell did you feed anyone?" I stared at my shaking hands. "I didn't feed it to her. She bullied me into letting her eat it." I asked quietly, "Where are you? Can you get to the hospital?" "I'm in the middle of a board meeting," he snapped. "You handle her. We'll talk later." Before I could process that, he dropped his voice to a cruel, commanding whisper. "And you're pregnant. Don't you dare go running your mouth to the cops. Don't make a scene. Do you understand me?" Hearing the word pregnant, I felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. I had never told him. I had hidden it so well that even Mia only suspected it. And yet he knew, and he said it with chilling casualness. I dug my nails into my palms to stay grounded. Over the constant beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor, I replied in a completely deadpan tone. "What are you talking about? I never told you that." He paused, realizing he had slipped up. "I just know. Don't ask questions about the soup. Don't mention it to anyone. Remember that." Click. I sat frozen. My ears were ringing. An old phrase echoed in my mind. A guilty mind gives itself away. If he was innocent, why was he demanding a cover-up about the soup? If it was just food poisoning, why did he react like he already knew the outcome? I opened the Notes app and typed 11:28 a.m. phone call with Blake. Accuses me of harming his mother. Knows about the pregnancy. Orders me to stay silent about the soup. I documented it like an incident report. My life no longer afforded me the luxury of trusting my memory. The ambulance skidded into the Mount Sinai ER drop-off zone. Neon lights reflected on the wet pavement. Doctors and nurses swarmed the gurney. I stood off to the side, listening to the medical jargon, terrified but grateful for their clinical efficiency. Catherine was rushed into the trauma bay. I was left in the hallway with freezing hands. An attending physician walked out. "Are you family?" "Daughter-in-law." His words were brief and sharp. "The patient is presenting with acute toxicity, severe muscle spasms, and unusual internal bleeding. This isn't common food poisoning. We're running toxicology panels, and by protocol, we are notifying the NYPD because we suspect a synthetic chemical agent." My vision blurred for a second. I didn't ask what agent because I was terrified of the answer. "Is she going to live?" "We're stabilizing her, but it's touch and go. I need you to cooperate fully regarding the timeline and exactly what she ingested." I nodded. Stay calm. Pressure turns coal into diamonds, but it also grinds weak stones to dust. I couldn't afford to break. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my back pressed against the cold wall. I placed a hand over my belly, not out of fear of being discovered, but out of a desperate need to protect. If Blake was right, if that soup had been tampered with, it was never meant for his mother. It was meant for me. I stared at the call log on my phone. The line was drawn. From this moment on, I was no longer a wife trying to keep the peace. I was a woman fighting for her life, her sanity, and her unborn child, armed with timestamps and an ironclad paper trail. The ER waiting room smelled of industrial bleach, latex, and the quiet desperation of people waiting for bad news. I sat completely rigid, my hands numb. My phone buzzed endlessly. Unknown numbers, corporate extensions, family group chats. I didn't answer a single one. One misplaced word could be twisted to sound like a confession. 30 minutes later, the attending physician appeared and pulled me into a quiet corner. He pointed to a tablet with lab results. Toxicity levels confirm severe poisoning. The chemical agent caused violent hemorrhaging. Hospital protocol mandates that we involve the NYPD. A detective is already on his way. My ears rang. I didn't ask for details. I just needed the immediate reality. Is she stable? She's critical, but guarded in the ICU. We're monitoring her closely. I nodded. A massive weight settled on my chest. Keeping the peace was my mantra as a daughter-in-law. But in a hospital, peace was no longer an option. We were operating under legal protocols now. When I walked back into the main hallway, Blake burst through the sliding doors of the ER. His suit was still perfectly tailored, his hair flawlessly styled. That pristine appearance made my blood run cold. It was the look of a man who had prepped his face for a war. Serena was right behind him, her eyes puffy and red, but her mouth worked faster than her tears. "Oh my God, Riley, how could this happen?" she wailed. Blake walked right past her and marched straight up to me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He glared at me like an interrogator. "What did my mother eat?" I answered clinically, stating only facts. "She ate the lobster bisque you had delivered to my office this morning." Blake's eyes darkened. He clenched his jaw, then turned to Serena like he was securing his witness. "See, I told you. You let people eat random garbage, and who takes the fall?" The phrase "let people eat" choked me. I wasn't a toddler being scolded, but I kept my voice perfectly level. "Blake, I didn't feed it to her. She ate it of her own free will. There were witnesses on the floor." Serena immediately jumped in, playing the weeping victim. "Riley, you're just trying to wash your hands of this. Mom ate in your office from your food container, and now she's in a coma. You claiming there are witnesses just makes it sound like you're planning a cover-up." I stared dead at Serena. I knew her game. She didn't need to yell. She just needed to assassinate my character. I spoke slowly, placing every word carefully. "Serena, do not make baseless accusations. This is a hospital. People work with medical records here, not feelings." Blake took a step closer, dropping his voice to a menacing growl. "Don't use that corporate HR tone on me. You received the food. You kept it. You're implicated. You're implicated." He was actively stripping away my status as his wife to paint a target on my back. I looked him dead in the eyes. For the first time, I felt not a single drop of affection for the man standing in front of me. Right now, I am the family member acting as the emergency contact. I will cooperate fully with the authorities, but do not project your liabilities onto me." Blake flinched, unaccustomed to me standing my ground. Serena let out a dramatic gasp, prepping for a full-blown meltdown to attract an audience. Right then, a nurse walked over. "Family of Catherine Sterling, the detective needs to speak with you." We were led into a small consultation room. A man in a cheap suit, but with the sharp posture of a veteran cop, stood waiting. He flashed a badge. "Detective Arthur Walsh, NYPD. I need to establish a timeline, the chain of custody for the food, and who ingested what." His voice wasn't aggressive, but it carried the weight of the law. I reminded myself, honesty is the best policy, but it must be delivered with chronological precision. Walsh looked at us. Who ordered the food? Blake answered instantly, his voice slightly higher pitched than usual. I ordered it, but I sent it to my wife. She was the one who gave it to my mother. I felt a chill run down my spine. She was the one. He was throwing me to the wolves with absolute ease. I didn't argue. I waited my turn and then spoke with crystal clarity. Detective, I want to state the exact timeline. I received the container in the lobby. I did not eat it because I was experiencing morning sickness. At approximately 11 a.m., my mother-in-law entered my office, saw the container, and pressured me to eat it. I refused. She took it and consumed it on her own, sitting at my desk. She then left the office and collapsed in the hallway. Shortly after, I called 911 and rode with the ambulance. Walsh scrutinized me. When you say she pressured, you were there witnesses? My assistant Mia and several employees outside the glass walls. Blake scoffed. Her assistant. Sure, her lackey will lie for her. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on the detective. The office has security cameras in the hallways and elevators. A subpoena will secure the footage. I am only stating what can be verified. Walsh washed, taking notes. He asked a few more questions about Catherine's health and the